Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar on Google Workspace updates for nonprofits. We last did a webinar on the Google platform and how nonprofits are using it about a year ago. So we wanted to bring our experts back and ask them some more questions on how to use this platform and how to get the most out of it. So if you're looking for tips and tricks, you've come to the right place. We're also going to talk a little bit about Google if you're thinking of migrating to this platform, so you can see a little bit what you're getting into. If you are in a situation where you have to manage a hybrid office where some people are using Microsoft or Apple and some are using Google, if that describes you, we did do a full webinar on that last summer also, so you can go check that out. We're not going to have time to go into that today, but we do have more resources on our site if you need them for that scenario. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'll be the moderator today. And before I came to Community IT, I was an IT director at large and small nonprofits. So I've been through a lot of this from the client side too. I'm happy to be here today with you all to talk with our experts about what we've been seeing and helping nonprofits with in Google Workspace. So Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Steve Longenecker. I'm the Director of IT Consulting at Community IT. I've been at Community IT for almost 19 years, and I'm really glad to talk to you about Google today.
My name is Luke Casey. I'm an IT business manager over at Community IT. I started out working as a help desk guy and worked up through various call centers and started doing system administrations work and then project management, and found my way here, and I'm really enjoying my time here at Community IT and excited to be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve and Luke. And before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit about us. We are a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support. So we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. So we are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts, and that is a recognition that we were given again in 2023 as an MSP 501 top MSP. So I want to remind everyone also that for these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic. We only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. We never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a benefit from that, but we do consider ourselves best of breed IT provider. So it's our job to know the landscape, what tools are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, their priorities, and their budget. So today we're going to talk about a common platform that a lot of nonprofits use, and we're going to give you our observations and advice. And once your organization makes the decision to use Google Workspace, of course, there's a whole associated suite of products that keep you within the Google family, much the way that Microsoft does with Office. So I also want to take a moment to let you know that you can use Google with Microsoft and Apple, and many organizations do have a hybrid office where people are on different platforms within their organization. It can be managed, and as I said, we have a webinar on our site on doing that management. But first, I am going to go to our learning objectives. So our learning objectives for today are to review the role of Google Workspace in the nonprofit sector and answer questions about continuing to use Google as your nonprofit grows. We want to learn about some of the changes to Google over the last year and how they can make life easier for your nonprofit. And we're going to spend some time in the second half of this presentation talking about how to avoid common headaches with Google implementation. So some simple updates and changes you make as you grow can really help you avoid a lot of work and headaches later. We interact with a lot of nonprofits who have managed their Google implementation themselves until they grew to a certain size. So we're going to share with you some of the quirky things about the setup that you can start doing now that could make your Google Workspace more secure and better able to accommodate you as your organization grows in complexity and your IT needs change. All right, so we are going to move on to talk a little bit about what Google Workspace is. So as I mentioned, we did a webinar on Google Workspace about a year ago where we go into a lot more in depth into what it is and how it works. But as a quick refresher for this audience, we're going to cover quickly what is Google Workspace and what tools does it include.
For sure. So the Google Workspace is a suite of products. It's very much a competitor or an analog to Microsoft 365 suite of services. These are services that are running from a cloud. You access them over the internet. So I'll just list them real quick. Not everyone. We have a podcast version of this later, so you can't see the slide. All of our audience can't see the slide. There's Gmail. That's obviously the email. Google Meet, which is the kind of the platform for video and text chatting. There's calendaring. Sheets, which is Sheets, Docs, and Sites basically are competitors to Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. So it's doing those three applications, services provide sort of the, spreadsheets, simple document editing or document editing, and then presentations like this one. And then Google Drive is a cloud file storage solution and a storage solution for all of your sheets and docs. Sites is web-based, like intranet-y type things. If you want to make a website that you share with others, you use Sites. And Slides is the PowerPoint analog. So Forms is another. These are all web-based products, sort of natively. Forms is a way that you can create questionnaires and pass them around to people. They fill out the forms, and that data then is brought to you. So it's a way to sort of collect data. And then Groups is an extension of email where you can create lists and of email addresses, and the people that are members of the list can email each other through the list. It's like a listserv is the old-fashioned name for it, but there's a lot of granular controls that you can have on that. We'll talk more about Groups later. Then off to the side, those 10 are kind of like part of Google Workspace proper. Off to the side is Analytics, which would be something that you could put on your organization's website or use with your organization's website to collect information about who is going to your website, where they're coming to your website from, which pages are more popular, and so on. Google obviously does an awful lot of their main business in terms of advertising and stuff, and search is figuring out what's on the web, and so they're really good at analyzing website traffic, and that's basically making that service available. And then YouTube. We're all familiar with what YouTube is. It's a way to watch videos online, but they have a nonprofit offering. Any business or organization can have a YouTube channel, but there's the part of being a Google for Nonprofits customer is that you can get some special deals on that, and that's a great place to put videos that are public facing or internally facing, if you want to, and make them easily accessible and visible and watchable. So that's that. Luke, you were going to talk about Google Voice. Give us a little rundown on that.
Sure. So Google Voice, again, it's not part of Workspaces, but because Google is very much about this kind of shared environment mentality, it has a lot of integrations and flows very easily together. And a lot of people who migrate into Google Workspace could start thinking about maybe we should adopt Google Voice. Google Voice is a competitor to things like Ring Central, 8x8, Microsoft Teams, any other kind of web-based phone system. A lot of people may think of it as just kind of that thing you get for an extra free number on your cell phone, but there's a lot more to it. It's a fully fleshed out phone system. It can do phone trees and call centers and all those kind of things that you need to if you're willing to put the effort into it. We're also, you may notice, we're not doing this in Google Meet. We're doing this in Zoom. And that kind of highlights one of the difficulties that you may face if you're migrating into Google, which is teaching people new tools and getting them to adopt to new technologies. So Carolyn is our presenter. She's not particularly comfortable working out of Google Meet, so we're working out of Zoom because learning a new system for one presentation, while it would be thematically useful, is, that's a difficult hurdle. So that's just kind of something that we'll be touching on throughout the presentation, but it illustrates the point.
Exactly. Thank you, Luke. So I have never given a presentation in Google Meet, and I have done many in Zoom. So for this presentation, to adapt to a new technology, as Luke and Steve, I think, alluded to, I did put our PowerPoint in Google Slides. And it was actually a very easy, I just uploaded it to my Google Drive and then I opened it in Slides. One thing I had to watch out for is that it does reformat some of the slides. So I went through slide by slide before this presentation and just made sure that everything looked correct and made a few adjustments. But then I was also able to break that tab off. So I was showing it as a tab in my browser. And then when I went to share my screen, I could just share that tab. So it's incredibly useful. I'm actually going to do this in the future. So one of the rules about adopting a new technology maybe is to do it a little at a time and make sure you're not trying to do a whole bunch of it before you have some kind of deadline, like a presentation or a gala or, a big report to your board or something like that. So, or at least give yourself a lot of opportunity to practice before you do that. So I'm already have in mind, like maybe in the future, I'll do a presentation in Google Meet, but I need to practice it first. All right, so we are also going to talk a little bit about the role of Google Workspace in the nonprofit sector. So Steve, you wanted to talk about some of these just reasons why nonprofits are.
Sure. And Carolyn mentioned the webinar we did on Google Workspace last year, and some of this stuff is a repeat because the story hasn't changed that much. We're getting new content coming up soon, I promise. But yeah, it is worth reviewing what Google's Workspace's role in the nonprofit sector is. Historically, back in the day, everybody had all of their IT on premise and generally, really small nonprofits might have just had a couple computers and that was that. But if you were big enough and organized enough to have a server, you had it in your office, in a closet, or in a server room if you were bigger than a small nonprofit. But everything was local, and then if you got really big, you might have your servers in a data center or something, but it was not in the cloud. Then cloud services sort of made their debut, quite a while ago, and there were two big players sort of launching around the same time. It was in the zeitgeist for, having these like email as a service instead of just email on your server, and files as a service. It was mostly email to begin with, though. And it was Google. It wasn't called Workspace at that time. I don't even think it wasn't called G Suite. I can't remember what it was called. I've forgotten now. I should have had that at my fingertips. But it was a Google service. It was like a way to have Gmail for your organization and therefore for your nonprofit organization. And Microsoft had something that was the precursor to Microsoft Office 365, which is what they have now, Microsoft 365. And in those days, we felt like it was a flip of the coin. Community IT, that is, felt like it was a flip of the coin. And we advised our clients to go with which, they were coming from maybe having Microsoft Exchange, again, on a server in their office. Or they might, if they did that, they were probably going to go to Microsoft's offering because they were used to Exchange, which was the Microsoft software that ran on a server. But let's say you were coming from like what used to be called popping email, like an email that came from maybe your web host. So you didn't know Exchange, you didn't know Google, like which should we do, Community IT? And we were like, yeah, you can pick. They're both good. They're both fine. And so we were literally having about half our clients go one direction and half our clients go in the other. And that's maybe one of the downsides of being so platform agnostic and product agnostic, and really letting our clients choose and supporting wherever they go, because we had a lot of going in both directions. I would say that, in all honesty, Microsoft really pushed along to improve their product. Neither product was great at first, of course. Microsoft really invested in and kept getting better and better, whereas Google languished. And there was a period of time where we had Google, again, it was called G Suite at one point, G Suite customers saying, this is not that great. Should we switch to Microsoft? And we're like, that's a big lift. It can be done, but it's expensive operation, and there's costs to that. We did do a number of those projects where we migrated people out of G Suite into Microsoft's Exchange Online. Again, it was mostly about email in the early days, and then we shifted to and we were recommending Microsoft strongly at that time, and then Google really started catching up, or at least catching up to being good enough. And meanwhile, it continued to be the case that Google kept being good at the consumer version of their Gmail, and so if you were starting a nonprofit and you weren't asking community IT because we weren't working with you, you were just a brand new nonprofit. It was just you and one staff person, and you're like, we got to have email. What are we going to do? And you look around, and there's Microsoft. It seems okay, but there's also Google, and I know Google because I use Gmail in my personal life, so I'm going to make Google. So yes, right there, that first one, easy to start up and administer, and so we have, and it sticks, and so we still have lots of clients, not probably half, but probably 25% to a third of our clients are Google Workspace customers. At this point, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily parity between the two, but Google Workspace is definitely good enough. The big sort of reason that people love Microsoft at the expense of Google is if they're devoted to the Microsoft Office desktop suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. If you love those products, it is nice to have all the integrations that Microsoft offers. But a lot of young nonprofits, especially, their staff are coming out of the schools today. Like my son, he's 19 years old. He is in college. He has access to Word and to Google Docs, both because he's got that through his college. They're both free. He can do either. He never uses Word. It's ridiculous to him that he would want to launch that software. He just does everything in Google Docs, including writing the papers that are due at the end of his courses. So nonprofits, the new ones coming out are like, we don't need this. Let's just keep it light, keep it easy, and we're going to stick with Google. It is like Microsoft, got great nonprofit pricing. We mentioned the familiarity from schools and personal use. And then, the age and size of the organization influences the platform choice. One of the other things that can sort of affect whether Google Workspace is a really good fit for you as an organization versus Microsoft is what your external stakeholders or partners are using. So I was just talking to a client about where they wanted to store their files in the cloud, and they were saying, we work a lot with the DC government. So they're a nonprofit, they're local here, they work a lot with the DC government, and everybody in the DC government is in Microsoft 365. Well, if everyone you're interacting with is in Microsoft 365, it sure is helpful for you to be in Microsoft 365. But the converse is true as well. And there are certainly plenty of nonprofits, particularly ones that are touching on the education sector. Either they are a nonprofit school themselves, or they're a nonprofit devoted to educational issues, and they're interacting with schools and teachers a lot. Then the fact that Google has been so dominant in the education space makes it very compelling to be in Google. And then it's also just preference and what people like. And that's very useful to understand as well. Once you've used Google for a long time, just like once you've used Microsoft for a long time, you get these workflows, you get these habits and everything, and you find the ways to make it work well for you. And changing, if it's not necessary, doesn't seem like it's a good idea.
No, I think that's something that we tell clients a lot is if you're already in the stream, keep rowing, keep going in the direction that you're going.
That's right.
It's can be very painful to change. So I think that in that case, the advantage to changing has to outweigh, the pain, basically.
Yeah, and just to reiterate it, what I said about how maybe 5 years ago, it did feel like Google had really not been investing at all. And it did feel like maybe we need to get off this, unhitch our wagon from this horse or whatever the expression is and switch to something else. We do not advise that now. For our customers that are in Google, we really advise them that unless you have a super compelling reason besides the quote, I shouldn't be so light about this, the whim of a new executive director. I mean, I would never say that to a new executive director, but like if
sometimes
you need,
that is what it is. Yeah.
yeah. So like that's not a good reason. And in fact, the services are very comparable in terms of the, the good enough that organizations generally need.
Well, and that's what we wanted to talk about on this slide is we do have some clients and some others in our network and our community who might be a little skeptical of Google Workspace, especially if you used it, the personal side, like you had Gmail and then you think like, well, is this going to, look sophisticated and serious if we're using Google Workspace for our nonprofit. And so it's interesting to know that we have several large organizations on this webinar with us today, the different sides of the coin. So when you're using personal Google, you're familiar with Gmail, search, YouTube, and voice, as Luke was mentioning earlier. Just be assured that when you're in Workspace Gmail, you're actually using your domain. So it looks perfectly, professional and sophisticated and grown up, basically. As you said, Steve, the personal Google was consumer focused and it started as search. But yeah, when you use professional Google Workspace, like the search just makes it very effective and efficient. So that's still kind of built around, I can find that file that I need. I can find that email that I, sent 2 months ago. Personal Google as well makes its profits from ads and data and not from selling to like your tech admin or your IT guy. So I think, Steve, you were kind of alluding to that a little bit earlier, as well as that over the years, like the Microsoft platform kind of was built to be sold to the IT person at your organization. And so they would get excited and enthusiastic about it and often be the only one who could administer it. And so then the rest of the organization had to kind of come along as well. So Google really has flipped that switch a lot. And so, you start off as being able to just implement Google yourself, a lot of their free tools, in fact. And then there's a different problem as you grow. You have to make sure that the platform is going to grow with you and be able to do all the things that you need as you grow from like a 1 or 2 person organization to 15, 30, 100-person organization. So Luke, when we were preparing for this webinar, you mentioned a very large professional use case near you, and I wonder if you could talk about this.
Sure. So I'm from Indiana. IU and IU Health leverage Google Workspace pretty heavily. And part of that is because the great kind of pricing and availability that are in place for educational purposes, but also it's very generational. If you look at kind of the workforce that's coming up and the workforce that's joining your organizations now, they're very used to working with cloud-based systems. They're in high school, they're in middle school, they're working out of Google Workspaces. And you're starting to see a lot of translation of that into large scale organizations who may say originally have, this is this, weird little thing on the side. This is this newfangled technology. It's not professional. It's not clean. But you have an entire generation that's coming in. This is what they know how to work out of. This is what they're comfortable in. And you're seeing organizations like Indiana University, IU Health, really turn and pivot towards that because it's easy onboarding for them. They don't have to train. The licensing costs are the same, and it's very scalable.
So I thought that was just so really interesting to hear that from you, Luke, when we were preparing for this. So it's not only possible, these organizations, these large institutions found it advantageous to use Google Workspace for their operations. So we wanted to talk a little bit about changes since the last Google webinar. And we want to make sure that we have a little time at after the second half of the presentation as well to talk about some of the headaches that you might encounter. But so I know, Luke, that you had talked a little bit earlier about Google Voice. So would you talk a little bit more about that?
Google Voice is a strong entrance in the VoIP scene at this point. It's very easy to set up and administer. Most people are pretty, as far as their kind of first blush with it, is generally just getting the app on their phone. If you need, another phone number for, spam calls or things like that, where you don't want to give the pizza place your actual phone number, whatever that may be. That's where it started, and it has really, really grown from there. It is now a full-fledged phone system. You can do everything from call queues, ring queues, really elaborate phone trees, and it'll work just like any other VoIP system out there. And it integrates really well with Google Workspace. Obviously, Google's a big fan of their whole shared environment, shared infrastructure. So bringing it into your org is a very, very quick stand up.
I'll jump into talking about the storage rules that have changed since 2022. And this was interesting for me because I hadn't really looked at this for 6 to 8 weeks until this webinar. And it's like, oh my gosh, the rules have changed again. So this is, it's not hot off the presses. If you're following the Google blogs, this probably changed in June, but I hadn't noticed it until very recently, like yesterday. So it has always been the case, and this is an answering a question that one of our attendees submitted in the registration process. Google Workspace for nonprofits is a tier in the Google Workspace universe that's free. So if you're using Google Workspace for nonprofits, you're not paying anything. And then if you want to use Google for Business as a nonprofit, you get it for like 25% of the full cost that regular businesses would be charged. And there's Google for Business Plus, which again, the rule at Google is you give the nonprofits a discount of 75%. They pay 25% of what the regular customers are paying. So it's only $3 a month for the Google for Business plan. The Google for Business plan gives basically 1 terabyte of storage to each person, and that you have each user. So if you have 10 users in your organization, that's $30 a month, $3 per month at the Google at the nonprofit price for this tier, and then that gives you you have your 10 users. They each get a terabyte, so you get 10 terabytes that are shared, that are combined and aggregated, and then so if one person uses 2 terabytes, which by the way, that's a lot of use. Like no one gets to. Maybe a media person who's storing tons and tons of video uses up a terabyte, but I think most of us are more like 1/10 of that. So it's a lot. But if one person does use 2 terabytes, that doesn't mean that if someone else is if 2 other people are only using half a terabyte each, the 3 of them together are still hitting in the average. Okay, so that it felt like Google was trying to push all of its nonprofits off of this free tier and into this business tier that, again, you're getting at a great discount. The price is excellent. We strongly recommended it to our clients because it's like the old storage rule for the nonprofit sector was that each user got 30 gigabytes. Keep my things, which is 1.3% of the 1 terabyte that the business cost. It was a very small amount, and it was very common for a user who'd been around for a while just to fill up their mailbox with attachments being sent over time. I mean, this doesn't happen in a year, but if you've been around for 10 years, you might be getting close to this 30 gigabyte limit. Long story short, in June, the nonprofit tier now gives each customer, each organization, 100 terabytes of shared storage. So it's no longer an issue storage-wise, whether you can just live in that free tier happily without worrying about storage as of June, which is fabulous. It doesn't mean that there aren't other reasons potentially to move up to the business level. But the big reason that we always noted was the storage limitation of the free nonprofit tier. That has now changed.
I want to make sure we have time to get to the headache. So I just want to make sure that we hit on these points. No. I mean, Steve, I could talk to you all day, and you are just a fountain of knowledge on Google Workspace. But I think there were some improvements in accessibility options as well.
Indeed. They've made some pretty recent changes. They're adding in new paired presenter modes, which allows for things like automatic AI-driven sign language interpretation, They've added Braille readers. They've really improved their voice to text and their text to voice functionalities, both within Google Meets and within Docs. A lot of it is kind of being test driven in the education sector. They're putting a lot of kind of test apps and test products out into their Chromebooks, which are oftentimes supplied to school systems. And they're doing a lot of stuff with developmental learners and people with various different learning experiences, and using that to kind of drive these platforms. And then it's coming back up into the Google Workspace. And that's where you're seeing things like these automated sign language interpreters and things like that, which are pretty awesome to see. It really helps expand the reach and expand accessibility for a very visual medium, which can leave out a sector of the workplace.
That's amazing. That is really cool to hear. Before we go on to the next bullet point, I have a quick question from Q&A on storage. So if you are a current Google Workspace user, when does that new storage take effect that you were talking about, Stephen? Does it just happen? Do you have to do something? Or
I think it just happens, but I'm not basing that on experience. Like I learned about this yesterday.
It's so new.
Yeah, I did check one of my clients that is on that tier, and it looks to me like they're in the clear now, like it just happened. But I haven't done a lot of testing with it, and I haven't had a chance to. So stay tuned, I guess, on that one.
Stay tuned. So everyone, I forgot to mention this, that they will have a transcript. So it usually takes a week or so for me to get the transcript posted to our site. We got a lot of questions at registration that we know we won't be able to answer all of those questions. So what we're planning to do is tackle all of those questions in the transcript. So we will, stay tuned. We will do the research and make sure that is also in the transcript as well, what you need to do as a user. And then this last bullet point, Google Meet, the calendar has been improved. And then also, of course, AI tools. Who wanted to tackle that?
I can take it real quick. So just in terms of I should mention on the accessibility options that, Microsoft's doing that too. Like all the players are using big data, AI, and all that to get better and better at this. I would say that Google is probably leading the pack. This is really their strength. Google Meet is now running in 1080p instead of old 720. Calendaring is a little bit better, more integrated with if you're sending calendar invitations to people that are using Exchange Online and Outlook, the integration is a little bit better. Just in general, I think the message on this last bullet point is that they're constantly improving all of the products incrementally, little by little. Each week they send out a big announcement of all the things that have changed. It can make your eyes blur after a while, but know that the days of Google like treating Google Workspace or Google G Suite or Google Apps or whatever it was like an orphan child and ignoring it, those are over. They are working on making this product better every week, month after month.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.